Even so, I spent money for the kids. I couldn't help myself, even if I didn't mean to at the time. It seemed like the correct thing to do. Yes, I realize it sounds awful, but give me a chance. At least I persuaded myself it was a minor situation. Then it wasn't, and now, well, here I am having made a huge mistake. Hello, this is Samantha. This is a mess, and I'm 33, alright, I'm not trying to justify myself. But sometimes it seems like life is falling apart, and I can't help it. Have you ever had the feeling that nothing you do would ever win and that everything is just heavy? That's me at the moment. I'm sitting here attempting to understand how I got into this major altercation with Jason. The entire home was anxious and money was on my mind. And what do you know? I was unable to stop myself. I've been married to Jason for 8 years. Hannah is 6 years old and Nate is 4. He's a decent man. But lately I don't know, he's been a bit too preoccupied with making sure we constantly manage our money sensibly and act morally. I'm not a wild spender or anything like that. I am capable of handling a budget. Simply put, I feel the need to flee when things get tight. Additionally, I use shopping as an escape, a small treat every now and then. I assumed it was innocuous, but Jason is all about saving money. Okay, so perhaps he is correct. And we ought to increase our savings. However, I'm not out purchasing high-end purses or anything. No, wasn't a big deal. It was simply a quick trip to Target and a small indulgence for myself. Jason kept talking about how we needed to increase our contributions to the kids' college fund. The day I did it, yes, I did hear him. I was aware of its significance. However, there was something about his lecture that annoyed me. You know what it was like. For the past few months, you have been acting as though I am the cause of our financial difficulties and that we will go bankrupt if I don't tighten up, and I detest that. I felt insignificant and as though I wasn't contributing enough. My recent sense of disconnection didn't help either. Jason frequently works late, and when he gets home, he spends all of his time on his phone, reading his work emails. He seemed to have forgotten about me, so when I made the choice, that's where I was coming from. I went to Target with the intention of picking up a few items rather than going crazy. However, it seemed as though my brain simply shut off as I arrived. I browsed the aisles and picked up a few items, including a cute jacket for myself, some toys for the kids, and a fresh set of toilet towels. At the time, they seemed like little things. Nothing major. I even persuaded myself that it made sense. I could always argue that we needed the new items regardless because the kids needed them. I knew what I was doing, though, deep down. I was trying to get away from all the stress by using the card. The bills, the conflicts, and Jason's aloof demeanor were the last things I wanted to think about. Naturally, I was feeling well when I arrived at my house. I felt a little energized. Similar to when you have the ideal lunch and everything seems to be in harmony. Jason then noticed the receipt. I can't even begin to explain the expression on his face. His eyes were filled with disappointment, which I could see. It seemed as though he didn't care about our future, and it wasn't simply the money, perhaps. I didn't, at least not then. I didn't even pause to consider the repercussions because I was so focused on doing something that felt good. I understand that he was furious, okay? Yes, I do. He wasn't listening to me, though, at the same time. He didn't understand how difficult things have been lately, how I've been feeling isolated and overburdened. He would not stop talking about how careless I was and how we should put the children's future first. We do, of course, but I also needed something. Is that really so incorrect? It isn't, in my opinion. I was unsure of how to express that to him. I didn't want to come across as weak or as defending what I had done. But I didn't think I was all that bad. He persisted in telling me that I was being selfish and that I needed to stop spending that way, and I finally lost it, although I knew it was terrible. I kind of meant it when I said, well, you don't care about me anymore. So why should I care about saving? Recently, he has changed. He's been so focused on making sure the kids are happy and that the expenses are paid, that he hasn't realized how much I need him not just to take care of us, but to be there for me. He has been acting as though I don't exist. So, yes, I made some purchases. In any case, they gave me a moment of feeling seen. He stopped talking. That ended when he entered the bedroom and closed the door. I was unable to even enter and speak with him. I remained downstairs and gazed at the luggage while experiencing a mixture of frustration and shame, even though I knew I shouldn't have Done it. I didn't feel completely incorrect about it. Surely I wasn't squandering the cash? It was only a few $100s after all. It's not as if it will result in our homelessness. However, Jason was unable to see it that way. And I'm left wondering now if it was worthwhile. Maybe I'm the issue here, though. Because it felt nice at the time. Perhaps I'm the one who's struggling. Do I feel bad about it? I'm not sure, perhaps, but not enough to make a significant difference. To be honest, if I could go back in time, I doubt I would do things any differently. It's simply who I am. I make snap decisions that come back to haunt me. Thus, following the Target incident, the situation worsened. Jason shutting me out like that surprised me, yet here we are. He hardly spoke to me for a few days. I sensed the strain rising. I realized I made a mistake, but I didn't anticipate his becoming so icy. I felt as though I was sharing a home with an unfamiliar person. Now it was the distance and the quiet, not simply the money. I didn't know how to remedy it. But I was becoming desperate. I was frustrated and he was angry, and nothing I did seemed to help. He always gave me these terse responses when I tried to speak with him. He can say something like, "We'll discuss it later," or simply nod his head and resume his activity. It gave me the impression that I was at fault and that I would be held responsible if I didn't make things right. But what do you know, nor was he attempting to make things better. I felt like I had to do something, anything, to catch his attention. The more he retreated, the whole "I'm sorry" thing was something I tried. But it didn't seem to matter. I tried to explain to him that I was under stress and was simply trying to cope with everything. But he didn't buy it. He never stopped reminding me that we needed to save money and put our children's future first. I truly understand, but you can only hear so much of that until it begins to sound accusatory. As if I'm solely to blame. The problem is that I'm not a moron. I'm aware that I shouldn't have allowed it to get that far or spent the money. But I thought I had no control over anything. I felt suffocated by the mounting bills and the expectation to be a good wife, mother, and person. Furthermore, sometimes it's easier to simply die than to continue swimming, isn't that right? I took a deep breath and realized that while I may have made a mistake in selecting Target, at least for a brief instant, I had some control over it. I was hoping Jason would change his mind. But instead he began discussing how we needed to manage our money more wisely. He was obsessed with tracking every dollar and spreadsheets. My head spun. The more he insisted on that, the more I felt inadequate and incapable of doing anything correctly. He was giving me the impression that I was failing as a wife when I was just trying to get by each day. He probably didn't intend for me to feel that way. But that's how it struck me. Admittedly, I began to stay away from him. His expression of disappointment, which I detested, was too much for me to handle. Avoiding him, however, simply made matters worse. He would spend more time on his phone or cooped up at the office. We didn't seem to be in a relationship but rather roommates, and what do you know? I had no idea how to resolve that when you feel like you're the only one trying. How can you mend a marriage? I tried to divert my attention, which is what I always do when I'm at a loss for what to do. I began to spend more time at home taking care of the kids, preparing meals, and maintaining the appearance of the house. However, even it didn't seem sufficient. I became irate with Jason for being so preoccupied with doing the right thing, as if his entire existence revolved around being sensible and accountable. And while that might be significant, it just made me feel insignificant. I made another attempt to speak with him, but this time I became defensive. "You're behaving like I'm the problem here, but we're in this together," I informed him, because I didn't want to assume the blame anymore. He's behaving like I'm some kind of villain, which infuriated me. Even though I did goof up with the money, I wanted him. But I didn't expect him to throw me a parade. I wanted him to realize that I wasn't merely attempting to destroy everything. He said, "I just want us to be okay, Samantha. I want us to be able to get ahead." I wasn't attempting to be careless, but that really got to me. I suppose I was selfish in some manner. The problem is that I was unsure of how to approach for assistance. I was at a loss for words when I told him that it was more than simply the money. That must be the reason I did it once more. The Target incident wasn't sufficient. I began to move a bit stealthily. I would go out alone, get lunch, or buy household items that I knew Jason would never approve of. But even though it was only momentary, it helped me feel better in a world that seemed to be going out of control. It provided me a small amount of control. He saw, of course, but I wasn't telling him. He did, of course. And that resulted in another quarrel when I had to defend my behavior and he looked at me as if he had forgotten who I was. Perhaps he is correct. Perhaps I've changed. Perhaps I've always been this way, but it's more apparent now. I'm not sure. All I know is that this is about something more significant. Something I'm not even sure how to resolve, and it's no longer simply about the money. Perhaps I made a mistake. Perhaps I keep making mistakes. However, it seems to me that Jason doesn't see me for who I am. He is not flawless, but neither am I. I really want to put things right, but I'm not sure how. I've only made things worse, but I wish I could make everything better. I'm now unsure if he will even pardon me this time, even though I was making a lot of effort to keep things together. It seemed like I was losing control of everything, even though Jason wasn't talking much. I could sense our tension rising. I became resentful of him. To be honest, I detested the fact that he seemed to be evaluating every action I took. He would return home, keep to himself, and simply hope for better. However, how could they be? There had been no change. I was still responsible for running the household. The bills continued to arrive and the tension persisted. He chose to ignore it, but did he really think that everything would just go away on its own? I simply couldn't stand it any longer. One day, the stack of unread invoices on the counter caught my attention as I stood in the kitchen. Tears were beginning to form, but I resisted letting them fall. It wouldn't help to cry. What use would my tears serve when Jason was already ignoring me? However, he entered, surveyed the scene, and simply shook his head. He was ready to say something, and I could tell. But I interrupted him before he could say anything. I screamed at him, "You think is easy for me." Jason gave me a weird look and said, "You think I like spending money we don't have? You think I'm doing this on purpose?" Samantha, this isn't just about the money. This is about everything. We're not talking. We're not connecting. It's like we're living in separate worlds. My chest was starting to constrict. He was obviously not understanding. He wasn't the one. I was attempting to balance all of this. It wasn't me who thought that a few careless errors were causing their entire world to collapse. Do you believe I'd like this? Do you believe that I enjoy being this way, Jason? I'm just trying to stay composed. My voice trembled as I shot back. But I wasn't going to show him how deeply hurt I was. I'm just trying to survive, and you're so busy trying to control everything. I didn't like the way I sounded, but I had no choice. I felt like I was punching back at the wall he had erected around us with every word. He failed to understand. He failed to notice the amount of strain I was feeling and how much the weight of it all was choking me. Jason sighed deeply and rubbed his temples as if he were suffering from a headache. I wanted him to understand that everything else was just as important as the money. However, I had no idea how. I had no idea how to convince him that I wasn't some heedless, self-centered individual who was simply discarding everything. My sense of what to do. Samantha, I'm not trying to control everything, he added softly. All I want is for us to avoid becoming deeply indebted. You know that if you continue to spend, we will eventually find ourselves in a situation from which we are unable to recover. It was impossible for me not to roll my eyes. He wasn't entirely incorrect, but I wasn't only having a good time. I was attempting to escape and get some relief. But how could I tell him that? How could I convince him that I wasn't simply being irresponsible with my money? He was too preoccupied with spreadsheets to give me a lifeline while I was drowning. Okay, so perhaps I don't want to be flawless. Tears began to well up at the corners of my eyes. But I forced myself to hold back. For once, perhaps, I just want to feel like I'm doing something right. Jason was silent for a while. I was even more irate since he seemed unsure of how to react. It felt like everything we hadn't spoken was building into a massive unspoken thing. And the quiet between us was oppressive. I turned away, attempting to conceal my trembling hands. I murmured, "Jason, I don't even know what to do anymore. I've attempted to make things better. I've attempted to be what you desire, but it never seems to work. How about we get together and discuss this?" His voice was suddenly softer as he spoke. Though it felt like too little, too late, I could tell he was making an effort. It was no longer about sitting down. Talking wasn't the point. It had to do with how long everything had been building, and how neither of us was willing to acknowledge how horrible things actually were. I said sharply, "I don't want to talk about it anymore." "Nothing is changed by talking, Jason. You simply don't understand the truth." He probably never would. Jason didn't see me since he was focused on the numbers, stability, and softly. When everything blows up in your face, notice the strain, the fatigue. I wasn't going to show him how much his remarks hurt. I retorted. When it seemed like everything was more resentful than I meant to, but that was the end of me. I've finished. Everything, even him and me. Yes, I was at fault, but I also, at the time, I didn't care if I didn't deserve his understanding. It remained quiet the rest of the evening. We both went to bed silently, the distance between us widening with each minute that went by. I felt as though I had done the worst thing imaginable, and I was at a loss for how to make it stop. Perhaps I didn't even know how to perceive myself, let alone how to get him to notice me. However, I was aware of one thing: I was sick of feeling responsible. Jason wasn't making things any easier, and it felt like I was to blame for everything. The more I considered it, the more I understood that perhaps I had made a mistake. But that was no longer just my responsibility, like a pressure cooker on the verge of blowing. I could feel the stress rising within me. I became more and more resentful of Jason the longer I sat with it. Yes, I made a mistake. But why did I constantly have to make the corrections? He no longer spoke to me very often and instead simply gave me dejected looks whenever I did something that didn't fit his definition of responsibility. In actuality, he was unaware of how difficult it was to maintain this marriage and how alone I felt within it. Yes, we had children and a family to support, but was that all there was to it? A list of duties now, an ongoing dispute over who should be responsible for correcting what went wrong. That wasn't all I wanted. I wanted to believe that he viewed me as his wife, someone who was worthy of more than his annoyance, rather than as a problem that needed to be resolved. A few days following our disagreement, I was standing in front of a storefront, gazing at a brand new purse that I had been eyeing for weeks. Believe me, I knew I shouldn't spend the money. However, I was also aware that it was the only thing that, for once, gave me a sense of accomplishment. I would feel wonderful for a little while if I bought it, and that short time would be sufficient for me. I promised myself that I would merely glance window shop, but I had a thrill of exhilaration. As soon as my palm touched the bag's smooth leather, I felt as though I was making a difference for myself. The fact that we were still overdue on our obligations and that Jason would be furious if he found out were irrelevant. For once, I didn't want to consider the repercussions. All that mattered was that I wanted this. To be honest, I nearly convinced myself that it wasn't a huge deal. I told myself that I deserved this, so I rationalized it. I have been working diligently, I'm trying, but I'm not flawless. It seemed like something I could tell myself to make myself feel better, and I experienced an overwhelming sense of relief as soon as I left the place holding the bag. Even though it was only a dumb pocketbook, I had done something for myself. But the guilt struck as soon as I entered the room, as if nothing were wrong. Jason was watching TV while seated on the couch. He saw the bag as soon as I entered the living room. "What's that?" he asked in a flat voice. As if he knew already, unsure of how to react, I froze. It wasn't like I could hide it, and I had no good justification. His face was already showing a mixture of annoyance and despair, and it was in my grasp. I made an effort to act calm, as if I wasn't about to lose my mind over my guilt, but I could see how his eyes narrowed, as if he was already adding it to his mental list of everything I had done wrong. "It's just a bag. Jason, relax." I detested the way he asked. "A bag, Samantha? We're behind on our bills, and you buy a purse?" As if I were a careless child with no idea what I was doing. Yes, I made a mistake, but it was about more than just the bag. It was about how I felt invisible and how our connection had faded. "Okay, I understand. I am aware of what you will say." I quickly regretted my harsh tone of voice. I didn't mean to start a quarrel, but it seemed like he was always one step ahead of me. Always the one with the solutions, and always the one telling me how to make things better. With a groan, Jason combed through his hair. "Samantha, this isn't just about the purse. It's about your impulse control, about how you don't think things through. You're spending money we don't have, and it's making everything worse." My chest was filled with rage. I yelled, louder than I meant to, "You think I don't know that? You think I'm out here trying to make things worse on purpose? You have no idea what it's like. Jason, you just sit there, watch me do everything, and then judge me when I do something for myself." He shook his head and got up from the couch. "I'm not judging you, Sam. I'm trying to help. But you don't seem to care about what's happening to us, to our family." Stop acting like you're the only one trying, I replied. I'm doing the best I can, I'm just not perfect like you. You think I don't see what's happening, you think I don't feel it. I hesitated, uncertain of my direction, but the words simply poured out. I just needed something for me, okay? Something to make me feel like I wasn't completely failing. Jason remained silent for a while, and I could tell he was having trouble understanding what I was saying. Even though I could feel the weight of everything between us, I wasn't prepared to give up just yet. I wasn't prepared to acknowledge my mistake. I wasn't prepared to own up to the truth that I had made a mistake and allowed things to go out of control due to my own bad decisions. His voice was low as he questioned, "Why do you always do this? Why do you always make everything about you?" Was the question that struck me more forcefully than I had intended. I knew in my heart that he was correct. All I had been thinking about needs, wants, and feelings. And that's why things were coming apart and why we were here. Even though I was entirely to blame, I was unable to acknowledge it. Not entirely, not yet. Waves of remorse swept over me. But I had no idea how to deal with it. I had no idea how to stop repeatedly making the same mistakes. So I shut down rather than confront it. His words were no longer what I wanted to hear. As I turned my head away from him, I whispered, "I don't know what you want from me." Jason simply stood there observing me without replying. "I'm just trying to survive this mess." He seemed to have given up on trying to help me, and I wanted to let him know that I was simply lost and not damaged. However, I was unable to find the right words, and I understood then that I was in over my head. The following morning, I awoke with the argument's burden still looming over me like an impenetrable cloud. Jason went to work without even attempting to speak to me. To be honest, I didn't blame him because I knew he was angry, although I detested the tension between us. Avoiding it was preferable to having to deal with my actions. It was simpler to act as though nothing was wrong and to rationalize my decisions in my own mind. I had earned that purse after all. I kept thinking about how he looked at me when he labeled me reckless and impetuous. Though I wasn't prepared to acknowledge their veracity, those comments stayed with me. Not entirely, not yet. I needed anything that would give me a sense of control over at least one aspect of my life. But not when everything around me seemed to be sliding away. Was that really incorrect? However, I found myself mentally reliving that fight repeatedly. As the day went on, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get rid of the small voice that kept saying, "You messed up, Sam, you really did." Whenever I felt like I had a valid explanation for what I had done, I had been sitting on the couch, looking at the TV for hours. By the time Jason got home, I could sense him observing me from the doorway. He didn't say anything broke at the first, silence at last,
and neither did
"We
I.
need to talk about
I felt
what's
as though
going
I couldn't
on,
breathe
Sam,
because
about
of the
the
money,
oppressive quiet
about
that
us.
existed
I
between
can't
us.
keep going
like this." My stomach began to drop. I was unwilling to discuss it. I didn't want to have to confront him and acknowledge what I knew deep down. My snap judgments were hurting us. I had no idea how to. And I didn't want to be the one to have to own up to my mistakes. Admitting that I wasn't as in charge as I wanted to be was like giving up a small part of who I was. I responded, "What's there to talk about, Jason? You don't trust me. You think I'm a mess. I need to know that we are on the same page." "That's not it, Sam," he answered, taking a seat beside me. "It's not about trust. It's about responsibility, about doing what's right for us. We have to think about our future, our kids. I'm not asking. I must know that you understand." I wanted to let him know that I truly understood. In actuality, though, I didn't, not entirely. I had no idea how to keep things in balance. I was unsure of how to be the mother, the wife, and the person I was meant to be. I felt like I was drowning in obligations, and Jason was the only one who could relate. I muttered, "I get it," but it seemed like I was lying. I could see the frustration in his face. But he remained silent for a while. "I know I've messed up. But you don't get it either. You're always so distant. Like I'm stuck carrying this whole thing by myself. And then when I do try to do something for myself, you act like I'm the problem. I'm not the only one to blame here, Jason, rather." He simply gazed at the floor while running a hand through his hair. He finally answered, "You're right," in a softer tone than I had anticipated. He looked up at me with a tired expression and said, "I've been checked out. I've been so focused on fixing everything that I didn't even stop to see how you were feeling. And for that, I'm sorry, but that doesn't mean you can just go out and spend money we don't have." I could feel the guilt rising inside of me once more, but I made an effort to suppress it. His eyes softened slightly, but I could still see the anguish there as well. I didn't mean to screw things up, Jason. I just wanted to feel good about something. I wanted to feel like I wasn't failing. I stared at him for a long time, feeling as though everything that had gone wrong, the bag, the money issues, the tension between us was consuming me. I know you feel that way, but we can't keep going like this. We need to figure this out. Sam, for real this time. Everything seemed so overpowering. I didn't know what to do next, and I detested the fact that I didn't have the answers. You're right, I finally murmured, just raising my voice to a whisper. I've been acting impulsively, and it's hurting us. I knew was true, but I didn't want to acknowledge it. Jason remained silent and simply nodded. We sat there in silence for a while, but not in the oppressive sense of the word. There was only silence, but that silence made me understand how much I had messed up and how much I had been avoiding the consequences of my actions. Even while I sat there, though, I couldn't get rid of the idea that I was not finished and that I would continue to make the same mistakes, that I might act out once again or purchase something else I didn't need, but all I could do was deal with the results of my decisions. I was not yet remorseful enough to change, but I might, just might, make it there eventually. I watched Jason get up and walk out of the room. I experienced that recognizable pain in my chest as he did, the one that served as a reminder that none of us knew how to mend the brokenness between us. I suddenly recognized that the main issue wasn't money, the bag, the debts, or even the breakdown of our marriage. I was the main issue. As I sat in the silence and watched Jason leave, I could feel the burden of everything pressing down on my chest. Perhaps he was correct, perhaps I was the issue. The idea of him leaving and everything collapsing due to my snap decisions was a gut punch. Even if I wasn't sure if I could stop it, I had no idea how to stop repeatedly making the same mistakes. I had ruined our relationship, our finances, and myself, and I had no idea how to get it back together. However, I was aware that I didn't want to lose him. I didn't want to continue making decisions that were detrimental to us both. For the first time in a long time, I began to consider the possibility that I might need to change for myself as much as for Jason and the children. I was afraid because if I didn't, I wouldn't know where this was all leading. To be honest, though, I was not yet in a position to guarantee anything. Not with so many aspects of myself still broken and so many behaviors I was unsure how to kick. I just sat there waiting for the inevitable repercussions, knowing that I was now responsible for everything, but secretly hoping that perhaps things might improve. I doubted if I had the strength to bear it. If I was lucky, I might be able to make amends someday. But I didn't deserve forgiveness, or perhaps not. In any case, I had to acknowledge the fact that I was the one who made all the mistakes, and it was the most difficult thing to acknowledge.